Welcome back to the 0 to 12K in 30 days surplus fund mini course. Again, the reason why I am qualified to do this is because my company, surplusfund.com, boom, you can kind of see it right there. We've helped literally now over 1,000 people go out and start their very own surplus fund business and do this successfully. So with that being said, guys, in this video, we're going to be talking about kind of some tactics and some strategies to go out there and close more deals, some marketing and sales tactics. If you guys have not watched episode 1 or episode 2, this is part 3 or episode 3, whatever you want to call it. And you need to watch 1 and 2 first because, again, last time I checked, that's how numbers work. And the last thing is, before we jump into the content today, if you guys enjoy these guides, if you are getting value from this series so far, make sure you guys subscribe and click the little notification bell because once a month I actually do a little post on YouTube, and for the first couple people that see that, they get free access to one of my paid courses. So if you want to see that in time and be one of the first people, make sure not only you're subscribed, but that you click that notification bell so that you are one of the first people to see it and have a shot at getting a free course. All right, so in this video, we're gonna be covering basically 4 main things when it comes to sales and marketing and actually getting people to agree to work with you in surplus funds. Because, you know, I know in the last video we covered leads, which, by the way, if you haven't watched the last video, go ahead and click the link down below. It'll take you to the playlist and watch videos 1 and 2 before you get here because it won't make sense. But assuming now that you have leads, you actually probably want to close some of those leads and turn them into deals. And that's where sales and marketing comes into play. And so there's 4 main things we're going to cover in this video about sales and marketing. First of all, it's the principles of sales and marketing for surplus funds, okay? Without the principles and the proper, overall, again, principles, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to close any deals. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter if you say it correctly, and your logistics won't matter at that point. If you don't have the general principles, it doesn't matter, okay? Then we're going to cover what to say. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a full script to give you guys. We do give one of those out in Surplus Fund Mastery, and it's helped close, at this point, $20, $25 million worth of deals, maybe even more. But unfortunately, I can't give that out to you guys because, we have people that pay a lot of money to get that script. But I can give you guys a general rundown or general idea of kind of the flow of the conversation, okay? Now, the next thing we're going to cover is exactly how to say it, because it's actually, in many cases, more important than what you say is actually how you say it. So we're going to be covering that in depth on this video as well. And then the final thing we're going to be going over is the logistics of closing a deal and how to really set yourself up on the phone when you're talking to people to actually get the deal done versus putting yourself and stacking the deck against yourself, which is what so many people do when they first start out. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the principles of, sales and marketing when it comes to surplus funds. And I want to start by saying something that sounds very, very contradictory. The first and most important principle of sales and marketing inside of a surplus fund business is to not sound like a salesman or a marketer, okay? So sounding like a salesman and a marketer is a gigantic no. It will actually backfire and it'll help you close less deals, okay? And the reason why is primarily speaking, the method of marketing that we teach and that we've used to, have our students find all their success has been one key word, and that's relationships. And how can we build relationships and, not necessarily build lifelong friendships. Like, that's, at the end of the day, that's not the goal of the call. The goal of our job in this case is to help them recover their money, but we need a relationship in order to do that, okay? So let me just pose some hypotheticals to you, and you tell me what you think is the right answer here. If someone is cold calling you, meaning you've never even heard of this person before, okay, and you just went through a foreclosure, so you probably got cold called a lot by a bunch of really annoying real estate wholesalers and fix and flippers and probably real estate agents as well, telling you that they can help you. And then, you lose your house to foreclosure. It's this really horrible event. Or maybe you're not in a foreclosure, but you're just getting cold called by some random person. And you finally pick up the phone to them. And the first thing out of their mouth is like, hey, I can help you recover money that you're owed. You're owed $10,000. Okay, and I can help you recover that. Okay, think about how weird that is. Okay, I don't know about you guys. I almost never answer random calls. Sometimes I'll listen to the voicemails that they leave, and if they're good voicemails, I'll call them back. And if I do pick up a random call and the first thing out of the mouth is like, hey, you're owed money, I'm going to help you recover it for a fee, I'm hanging up the phone immediately, okay? Now, of course, I'm not everyone, but I would say most of you guys on here would agree with me there, okay? But if you call them and you build a relationship with them, and it doesn't, again, you're not getting married to this person. It's not like this like long process, okay? But instead of leading with money, you lead from the heart and you say, hey, I'm here to help you, okay? I am here to be of service to you. That works about 1 billion times more than any sales tactic or anything like that, okay? So understand that in this video, yes, I'm calling it sales and marketing because technically that's what it is. But understand that our goal is not to be a used car salesman. Our goal is not to, our goal is not to be a salesman really at all. Our goal is simply to call people, notify them of what's going on, and use what's called education marketing, okay? Educate them on what's happening and be the teacher / coach / mentor that can help take them across the finish line. And really it's just their guide, okay? You are their guide to take them from step 1 to step 10 to getting paid. Now, the second big principle of sales and marketing in the surplus fund business is to meet people where they are at, okay? And what I mean by that is I don't mean like geographically meet them where they're at, although that is technically, I guess I kind of do mean that, but what I'm more referring to here is understand that everyone you talk to is going to be in a completely different place mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? All these things. And if you don't understand this, you're not going to be able to close deals. And the reason why is because if I call you and you're extremely emotional, again, you just lost your house, we'll say, and you know, just things are not going really well in your life, and maybe you start yelling at me or something, that doesn't mean the deal's done, okay? All that means is that, you know what, hey, right now you're not in the right headspace to do this. So I need to understand that. If I get angry and I attack you because you attacked me, well, now the deal's definitely not going to happen, okay? But then I get on the phone and my next call is someone that's totally calm, collected, wants to work with me right away, right? And so you have to understand that you're going to be talking to a wide range of people with all different, you know, backgrounds and lifestyles and, you know, things going on in their life. And so you never know what's going to happen when you talk to someone. You know, again, they might be really wanting to work with you immediately. They might not be. They might have an issue with one particular thing. Someone else might not. And the other phrase, or the other meaning of this phrase is, you know, understanding with your marketing, you want to meet somebody where they're at. So not just, you know, emotionally and all that, but you also want to meet them where they're at with whatever medium of communication that they're using, okay? Medium of communication. So what a medium of communication is, you know, different ways you can communicate with someone. So for instance, an example of a medium of communication is a phone call, okay? Now, there's going to be some people you talk to that are really responsive on the phone, and they love when you call them, and it's great. But then, you know, maybe it's a younger demographic or even an older, you know, demographic that when you call them, they'd rather not be on the phone with you. They'd rather just shoot you a text or shoot you an email. And if that's the person you're talking to, then you'd be way better off saying, okay, forget the phone call. Let me just shoot them a text, right? So it's very important you understand that you need to meet them where they're at emotionally, spiritually, sometimes even physically. Maybe you need to go and meet them in person. Okay, at like a local Starbucks, always be careful doing that. You never know what's going to go, happen. I wouldn't go over to someone's house, okay? But, go to a public place. Be careful. But, not just in that regard, but also in the regard of meeting them with the medium of communication that they want, okay? Do they want to talk on the phone? Do they want to talk on email? Do they want to talk on Facebook Messenger? Do they want to talk on Snapchat, okay? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me, but whatever is going to close the deal, that's the way that we're going to talk, okay? So it's important that you meet them where they are at. Now, the next big principle is the principle of persistence and consistency, which I can summarize by 2 words, which is follow up. Okay, follow up, follow up, follow up. So inside of our Surplus Fund Mastery program, all of our students and our community in there, we're all surplus warriors. And when you become a surplus warrior, we actually have 5 declarations that we make our students commit to, because without those declarations, you basically can't be successful in this business. And one of those declarations, in fact, one of the most important ones, is the declaration of persistence and consistency. And really what that means is, hey, I might call someone and you know what? Maybe the call didn't go through, okay? Maybe the first number I called, the second number, third number, fourth number, fifth number, all those 5 numbers I called, maybe they were all wrong, okay? And, I don't really want to call the 6th number because it's probably going to be wrong, right? But then you know what? You say, let me man up, let me woman up, and I'm calling the 6th number anyways. Okay, that's persistence and consistency, right? Maybe you've talked to someone once or twice, they're kind of hemming and hawing, you feel like they're kind of wasting your time, but you know you can help them, right? And so instead of giving up and saying, oh, this deal's never going to close, you call them again, and you call them again, and you don't harass them, but you follow up with them, right? Maybe once a week, maybe once every other day, whatever it is, but you call them, and you might have to call them for weeks, right? But eventually you can get that deal under contract, and you can help those people out. And that's really what it comes down to. If you're leading with money, if that's all you care about, you're not going to be willing to do this. You're not going to be willing to build a relationship. You're not going to be willing to, meet them where they're at. You're going to try to, take the shortcuts and do it your way, right? And you're not going to follow up because, again, you'd rather just get the quick closes, which, yeah, you're definitely going to have those too, but then you're going to miss out on all the money in the follow-up. And Grant Cardone has a quote where he says 98% of sales are closed, guess where? In the follow-up, okay? And we call follow-up here, I call it FU, okay? And the reason why I call it FU is because if you, meaning you or me, does follow-up and your competitor does not do follow-up, well, you're basically giving them the FU because they're not going to have 98% of the sales that you have, okay? So that's why follow-up is so important. And that's why all these 3 principles are really, really important, okay? Understand that these are the foundations for your entire sales and marketing business, okay? For that entire side of or department of the business. You have to be building relationships, you have to be meeting them where they're at, and you have to be willing to follow up. If you can do those 3 things, everything else will come pretty easily. All right, so the next thing we need to cover is exactly what to say. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, I can't give you guys our script because that would not be fair to all the people that joined Surplus Fund Mastery. And quite frankly, too, we have like maybe 2 hours worth of videos in that program going through all of our different scripts. And so I don't even have enough time to go through all of it. But what I can give you guys is kind of a general rundown, okay? The first is the kind of 3 phases of the conversation. And not even necessarily the conversation, but kind of the interaction, okay? So the first thing you have is you have the opener, okay? Then at the end, you have what's called the close, okay? And then in the middle, okay, you have kind of this part where you're really trying to basically figure out exactly how to get them here, okay? So if you want to call this like the actual sales part, okay, maybe with quotes, okay, then that's great, okay? But if we jump into this framework here and we say, okay, opener, what's the best opener? And what we always teach at Surplus Fund Mastery and really with all of our students is the best opener is simple, direct, and to the point. Okay, towards the beginning of the call, you're going to be asking a lot more questions to do a couple things. Number 1 is verify that you have the right person, right? So we always recommend the best first opener is just like, hey, is this so-and-so from, whatever address, or from down the street, or from, in the the next street over, or whatever, okay? Or from whatever city or something. Okay, so you can verify it's the right person because they're like, hey, this is Ryan from Ladera Ranch, okay, or Irvine or whatever, and you know that they live in Irvine. You'd be like, oh, awesome, man. Hey, and then you follow up with another, sort of verifying question, which is like if you're doing mortgage funds or tax funds, something along the lines of, hey, man, well, actually, did you happen to used to live at, whatever address was foreclosed on? Okay, and if they say yes to both of these, then you're probably talking to the right person. Okay. Now, of course, later down the line, you're going to need to go ahead and grab a what's it called? Typically a driver's license or ID from them to verify them, anyways, or even in State Fund's case, a Social Security number. But this is a good verification to make sure you're not wasting your time. Okay. So that's usually the best opener. And just to remember, the goal of the opener is just to start the conversation. Okay, it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Of course, there's some more creative ways to say this. Okay, one of them that we talk about here is like, "Hey, is this a Notorious Spencer?" Something a little bit more friendly. You should say, "Hey, is this Spencer?" you know? It really just want to verify who they are. And you want to verify who they are and you want to start the conversation. That's all you're trying to do, okay? Once you've verified who they are and they started the conversation, because sometimes it's a little trickier. Sometimes you say, hey, is this Spencer? And they'll say, well, who's calling? And then what I like to say at that point, there's different ways to go with it, but what I like to say is, hey, you know, I'm a, you know, representative of, you know, the Treasury Department, the state of California, which technically, you know, if you're doing state funds, you are. If you're doing mortgage funds or tax funds, there's other things that you can say there, but you want to build a little bit of authority, but don't tell them exactly what it is. Okay, you want to leave a little curiosity, and then you want to follow it with like, you know, so is this, you know, and then, hey, I'm looking for Spencer. Is this him, you know, or her, or whatever? And usually at that point they'll talk to you. Okay. But anyways, so that's pretty much the opener. The next part is the sales part. So there's a great book I really recommend. There's actually several. And the first is The Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. It's a great sales book. We'll talk about it more when we get into how to say things, but this is a really good fundamental book. Another one is called Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone. Okay. Another great book. Okay. If you guys have not read it, really fundamental. And then another one, and my personal favorite, is called Spin Selling, okay, by Neil Rackham. It's my favorite sales book, okay, and I typically use this framework when I'm doing sales calls, okay, so just keep that in mind, okay. But basically, in the sales part of the call, what you want to do is you want to, first of all, ask them questions, okay, and these questions are less to verify who they are, but to, you know, get some what I call gathering intelligence, okay, and I did not come up with that, one of these guys did, but gathering intelligence, okay? So you want to figure out a little bit about them. You want to figure out some pain points and some pain points and some pleasure points for them. So for instance, if I'm trying to sell you a cookie and I'm like, hey, cookie's really good, you know, it's delicious, you're really gonna like it, and you know, you might not care about that. But if I'm like, hey, if you eat enough of these cookies, you won't have to eat a salad because you'll be full, okay? Then that might work for you, because even though you don't care that it's delicious, you're gonna think like, hey, it's better than a salad, and I don't want to eat a salad. For, let's say you're anti-salad, okay? Horrible example, but you get the point. Everyone's different, so you need to ask questions. You need to kind of gather intelligence about who they are, okay? And there's different strategies on calls, okay? Typically, surplus funds, you're looking at a 1 to a 4 call close, which means, you know, this process of the sales process may last a long time. You may be asking questions, following up with them for 1 to 4 calls, right? Now, look, there's also deals where you'll call the first time, you'll ask them 3 questions and be like, hey, so is this something that you want to do? And they'll be like, yeah, let's do it, okay? So there's no hard rule on how many calls you have to do, but just keep in mind that, you know, the better you are at asking questions and gathering intelligence, the easier this process is going to be. Because once you have that intelligence, you can follow what I call this, again, I shouldn't say I call it, but what the book Spin Selling calls the spin framework, okay? Which basically says there's 4 types of questions, okay? And I'm not going to go into like this whole spin selling spiel right here, but basically there's 4 types of questions. The first is situation questions, where you ask, you know, and you get their situation, you know, so hey, they just went through foreclosure, or they lost, you know, someone in their family, or whatever the situation is, okay? So that's situation questions. Then you've got problem questions. So now you're specifically talking about the problem. So again, hey, you got in foreclosure, like, you know, what does that cause to your family? Like, why did that happen? Or what is the problem, basically? I guess the problem question in this case would be that they got in foreclosure in the first place, okay? Then you've got implication questions, which this is a negative, a negative question. So for instance, their situation is that they are a young couple that lives in California. Their problem is that they just lost their home to foreclosure, and the implication of that is now their credit is messed up. You know, their husband lost their job, or the husband lost his job, okay? And they really don't have any money, okay? And they have no money to put their kid, this is really dramatic, but to put their 3-year-old in, you know, I don't know if that's too old for preschool, or I don't know what the preschool, but we'll just say preschool. Might be completely off, but hopefully that's the right age, okay? So this is the implication of them going to foreclosure, okay? And technically, I guess the husband losing his job would have happened before, but you get the point, okay? So now we're finding the implications, and now we come to them with this offer of like, hey, well, I know you don't have any money right now and your credit's kind of messed up, but what if I could show you a way to fix those things? Like, if we did fix those things, how would that affect your life? That was the worst letter N I've ever seen. Okay, how would that affect your life? And kind of see what they say, right? So if obviously, again, if their implication is they don't have any money and their credit's bad, if you say, hey, if I showed you a way to fix that, and then you let them talk about it, and that's the key. You want to let them sell themselves. You don't want to be like, oh yeah, if you had more money, you could get a house and you could finally send your kid to preschool and all this. No, instead what you want to do is you want to say, hey, so if you did end up having like maybe $20,000, what would you be able to do with that? Like, how would that affect your family, right? And you just want to let them talk, because they're going to be like, oh, well, I could send my kid to preschool and I could finally fix my car or get a new car. And, we could get actually move in somewhere because we'd have a deposit. We'd have to, move out of our parents' house. And we could do this and this and this and this, right? And so that's a need payoff question. So these are kind of the frameworks of the conversation that you're going in. First, you're getting their situation. Then you're establishing the problems that they have. Okay. Then you're establishing the implications of those problems, meaning the negative outcomes. And then you're establishing the positive outcomes out of fixing those problems for them. And if you can do these 4 things, basically, which a lot of these are, situation and problem questions are both pretty easy. Okay. You're going to be doing really, really, really well. Okay. So now we've talked about the different types of questions, and I really do recommend you read those books. I want to kind of talk about the framework of a call that we use, which is called the kind of the straight line. And this comes from that Way of the Wolf book. So I'm going to write straight. And in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the world's least straightest line. Okay. I'm not the world's greatest artist, so I apologize. Basically, there's a couple things to keep in mind here. First of all, with the straight line, you've got your open, and you've got your close, and you've got what's in the middle. Okay. And your job is to guide them from the open to the close, okay? Now, while you're doing that, a couple things are going to happen. Things are going to be going really good. And then they're going to start talking about, I don't know what, about their kid's soccer team, okay? And they're going to start working their way this way. And if you don't nip this in the butt and get them back on the straight line, you're not going to close the deal, okay? They're going to end up flying out of here, out of orbit, and they're going to end up over here, okay? So your job is not to, cut them up and say, hey, lady, I'm not interested in hearing about your son play soccer, okay? But you do want to say, hey, you know what? That's awesome. I'm super excited. And you want to ask a question like, hey, so what would it mean if we recover this money for your kid? Would you be able to get him some nice new, cleats or shin guards, or like, how would that help? Would you be able to get him on a nice club team or something like that, right? And so see how I just kind of naturally guided it back here. Okay, now you're going further and they start talking about the quarantine, the coronavirus, and all this. You're like, oh, I know, man, things are really, really tight right now. How would, $20,000 help you during this crazy time? So see, I've just guided them back onto this, okay? So as we're going on here, you want to keep them on the straight line, okay? They're going to try to go off this way. They're going to try to go off this way. It's your job to turn that back around while still being polite and professional, but keeping them on this straight line to get towards the close. Now, especially during the early part of the calls when you're going to be asking a lot of questions, okay? But truthfully, honestly, when I'm on sales calls, I'm kind of asking questions the whole time. I'm never really declaring anything. I'm kind of just asking questions and letting them do something on that I call, or actually I learned this concept from a guy named Russell Brunson. It's called inception selling, okay? And the thing about inception selling is it's kind of advanced. It's difficult to do, but the concept is pretty simple. So basically, let's say I want to get you to, work out every day, okay? Now, if I went up to you and I said, hey, you need to start working out every day, okay? You're going to get defensive. You're going to be like, no, I don't. You're going to say, oh, I already do. Maybe we don't even need the same thing, right? It's just going to be, you're going to put all what I call like blockers, basically, to listen to anything I'm saying at that point, because I'm telling you what to do. Nobody wants to be told what to do. So instead of saying, hey, you need to start working out every day, I can come up to you and be like, hey, man, so let me ask you something, man. How often do you work out? Like, oh, I haven't really been that into it lately. All the gyms have been closed. And I'm like, dude, I totally get it, man. And what's crazy is I really, I used to play, a lot of sports when I was younger, and then I went a couple years without working out, and it was really tough. You know, and I got back into it, and it was so super tough. I remember the first day I started working out again, I literally almost threw up in the gym. It was crazy. I never felt like that way in my life. Just doing legs, it was crazy. And it really sucked. You know, when was the last time you went to the gym? Did you have an experience like that? And they'll probably be like, oh yeah, I did. You know, actually, you know, and that's probably how it'd be if I went back now. And then you'd be like, yeah, I know, but you know, it's funny, man. I thought the same thing, and I remember wanting to quit, but something told me like I had to keep going. And you know, eventually, you know, after like maybe the second or third week of just consistently going, I didn't feel that way anymore. I actually really started to enjoy it. And now that I've been going, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 a year, you know, total, you know, almost every single day or every other day or whatever it is, you know, I absolutely love it, man. It's something I can't even, you know, I can't ignore. You know what I mean? It's almost my favorite thing to do. And I have more energy, and you know, I you know, can spend more time with my kids and do all that stuff. You know, so yeah. And you see how I'm kind of building up the value of it, but I'm never telling them, hey, you should go to the gym. I'm never like, hey, you need to go. Okay. What I'm saying is that for me, it helped me a lot, right? And if I'm their friend, they're probably gonna listen to me. Okay. So anyway, just something to keep in mind here. Okay. Again, you want to keep them on the straight line here after you know, ask questions, figure out their situation, figure out their problems, and you want to start pushing them towards this close. All right, so now we've talked about exactly what to say. We're going to talk about how to say it, and this, to me, is the stuff that's much more interesting, because simply by changing your tonality, you can dramatically alter what the meaning of words you're conveying is. Okay. So to give you an example here, and I'm going to use kind of a vulgar example. I'm not actually going to say it, okay, because I'm trying not to curse as much anymore. But I will paraphrase it for you guys, okay? Imagine you're out with your friends, okay? And guys do this a lot. Imagine you're out at like a bar or a restaurant, or you're just out hanging out, and you know, you're one of your guys, you know, one of your friends rips on you, okay, and makes a joke about you, and you look at him and you're laughing about it, and you say, hey man, you know, F you, man, and you kind of laugh it off, right? Versus imagine you're driving a car and someone cuts you off, and you roll down the window and you scream at them the same phrase, F you, right? Two completely different scenarios, two completely different meanings to what you just said, but yet you said the exact same thing as far as the words that you actually spoke, okay? So this is why tonality and body language especially is so important. And a lot of the training, and most of you guys that are following this are probably not going to be doing door-to-door, you know, like door knocking to get deals, although I do recommend it. But you still need to learn a little bit of body language, even if you're not planning on ever seeing your clients, because some of that body language is conveyed over the phone, okay? So I'm not going to go through all the tonalities. That's where that book, Way of the Wolf, comes in. He talks about, I believe there's like 8 to 12 different tonalities. I'm only going to go through a couple of them, and pretty much the most important one. So the first one is the questioning tonality. And the questioning tonality is really good to use, obviously, when you're asking questions, because it makes you sound a lot less like you're interrogating them. Okay, let me give you an example here. Imagine if, you know, you and me were hanging out, and, you know, I'm like, hey man, so what have you been up to today? And you're like, oh, I've just been hanging out, right? Versus if I was like, hey man, so what have you been up to today? Right? And you're like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Okay. Just by changing my tonality there, I took it from me just, hey man, like what's going on, you know, to like, I'm interrogating you. Okay. So the questioning tonality, the way it works is the pitch of your voice raises up towards the end of it. So I'm saying, hey, what's up? Right? Versus what's up? Right? And see, kind of there, I still do it naturally because I've done this for so long now. It's almost difficult for me to do it. Okay. So when you're asking questions, if you're saying, hey, you know, so how long have you lived at your, you know, current city? Right? Don't be like, hey, you know, how long have you lived in Irvine? Right? Okay. You want to end the question with a little bit of a higher pitch. Now you also don't want to sound like you're, you know, singing karaoke. You don't want to go too high. Okay. So you don't need to, like, if let's say your pitch is a 5 out of 10, you don't need to go to a 10 out of 10 at the end. You just go to like a 6 or a 7. Okay. So it's the first part of the question is all a 5 out of 10. And then when you get to the ending, and maybe you jump it up to a 6. Okay. Or a 7, just so it's a little noticeable. You don't need to be like going crazy out here. You're not an opera singer. Okay. So that's number one. The next one is a version of this, which is called the reasonable man tonality. And this is kind of a really deadly one as far as like closing people on the phone, because what you're able to do with this is you're able to imply that they're unreasonable for not agreeing with you without actually saying that. So for instance, let's say we're talking on the phone and I tell you, hey, you know, it looks like here you're actually owed about, you know, $25,000 from the state. You know, if you have a minute, I can actually share with you exactly how, right? So by saying, hey, if you have a minute, with kind of a questionable, reasonable man tonality right there, you know, you see I'm pre-framing them for saying, hey, if you say no to this question, you don't even make any sense. Like, I'm telling you, you're owed $25,000. I've been nothing but genuine and honest to you. And now I'm saying, if you give me 60 seconds of your time, I can tell you how you can get $25,000. You know, you see very quickly how that is, it's very unreasonable to not agree with that. Okay, it's very unreasonable to not agree with that. So this is the reasonable man tonality, and you don't want to overdo this. You don't want to overdo the reasonable man tonality, because if you did that at every single question, it would just be like, dude, like I have enough. Like I have too many 60 seconds. It's just it's too much. Okay, too much. So you want to do this like once or twice, you know, maybe per call. Okay, and then the last one I'll go over in this one is one of my favorite ones. It's the whisper. Okay. And I don't know the actual name for this, but I will, like, it's basically telling a secret, okay? So if you think back to when you were a kid out on the playground and someone was telling you a secret, what did they do? They whispered, right? They didn't walk up to you and say, hey, I have a secret, okay? They went up and say, hey, psst, 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 right? So the reason why the whisper works so well is because if you just randomly throw in a whisper, people will naturally like lean in and kind of want to listen more. Okay, there's actually a quote in sales that says, if you want people to listen, yell, and if you want people to really listen, whisper. And a great example of this is if I was talking to you at this tonality and all of a sudden I went to this and I told you something really crazy. You know, if you want to sign right now and close this deal, I really think we can get this done really, really quickly. Right. So all of a sudden I just dropped my tonality right there, and immediately it was like, whoa, right? And that's a pretty poor example, but I think you understand again how powerful whispering is. So these are 3 tonalities that you can use that are really, really effective. Again, you don't want to overuse these. You're not using these every single time, except for the questioning tonality if you're gonna ask a question. But even that, there's exceptions to that too. But especially the reasonable man and the whisper tonality, you don't want to be whispering the whole time because it kind of loses its impact. Okay. So yeah, but this is kind of the tonalities, and the body language goes directly with this. You know, another tonality is the tonality of certainty, right? And when you're closing someone, you need to have an absolute certainty in what you're doing. You can't be questioning what you're doing when you're closing. You can be like, hey man, so do you want to close a deal? I think I can help you, right? See, at that point, it sounds like I'm not really sure, okay? But if you're like, hey, listen, man, do you want to close this deal? I know 100% for a fact I can get this done, right? All of a sudden, yes, I changed the words a little bit, but my tonality was dramatically different, okay? And when I did that, you kind of hear maybe my hands clapped a little bit. I made a fist, okay, because I'm really declaring certainty, okay? So keep in mind, you know, what's the natural body language for these tonalities? And when you're on the call, try to practice your body language to match your tonality, okay? In fact, I would actually, you know, as kind of an at-home exercise, if you guys are watching this, I would go ahead and maybe get a friend or family member, or hope maybe you have someone watching this with you, and I would practice these different tonalities just throughout the day with them. You know, just call them and say, hey man, what are you doing for lunch today? You know, hey, if you have 60 seconds, I can tell you about a great place to go to lunch, you know, or stuff like that. So again, just go out and practice these tonalities, and you know, get some role playing with you know, all these different tonalities. All right, so next we're gonna talk about logistics, and this video has already gone super, super long, and honestly, we could talk about logistics for a little while. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the last part, which is part 4. I'm gonna talk about logistics, okay? I'm gonna talk about contracts, and I'm gonna talk about the actual process of closing and getting a deal under contract and submitted and processing the whole deal and the best ways to do it, okay? So make sure you guys are subscribed, make sure you guys have clicked that notification bell, and that way you can get notified as soon as the next part comes out, as well as get notified when our next you know, ultimate guide comes out, which I'm trying to do these maybe once a month. And with that being said, I will see you guys on the next video. Feel free, click the link down below to get the full playlist.